Welcome to Panelism, a podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask.
Good evening, Taylor.
I don't know if I was supposed to keep going. I was like, maybe he's waiting for me to roll on and it was some pithy comment of some kind. I just don't have one.
Oh, no, we're regrouping in the new year. And sort of planning out number 100, which is happening next week.
Yeah, we were doing some math earlier. If you listened, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, it dawned on us that we were nearing episode 100. If you go by sort of the long fraught history of the show, is it started off as one thing and evolved into another thing, and then evolved into this with a lot of common thread along the way. So we're counting all of those episodes, and 100 is the one after this one. Can you believe it?
Yeah. It's actually, there's actually technically more than 100 already. So we're not padding the numbers at all. If anything, because we went back and sort of squeezed in like some 0.5 episodes and
true.
And the American Gods cast that you keep telling me not to mention again. And
nobody wants to know about that anymore.
But it's in there. I feel like we're finally getting our own lore, our own like history of episodes.
If you're not familiar, there was a brief moment in time where I personally thought the Stars, American Gods TV series was going to be my new favorite thing. Because I love the book, love Neil Gaiman, and I just could not. And we started a show. I was like, let's do a podcast. We'll do a podcast for all the seasons of the show. And I couldn't get past episode 3 before I was like, Todd, we can't do this anymore. The show is not for me. And we just sort of quietly killed it behind the barn, and that was that. And
I was happy though that we mutually killed it. It wasn't like my interest faded. We were trying to do it where you had read the book and were such a fan, and I was not a reader, and we thought that would be a good opposites. Our Game of Thrones podcast where the reverse is true, and we just arrived at that point and went, no, that's no good. So I have to tip my hat to those entertainment podcasters that just talk about every episode of a show forever. I think.
Yeah. I mean, unless you
even
made
with Game of Thrones, it had been established before we started a podcast.
That's true. We never really did, as seasons 1, 2, 3 of Wednesday in Westeros. And I don't know if we even need to at this juncture, but that's interesting that we never really jumped in on American Gods.
So, So we've got some. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, you may be about to say this. I was going to ask you because we haven't chatted since before Christmas officially. I went off on my trip. You went off on your trip, and you wonderfully handled Instagram while I was away, which was interesting for me because I really wanted to post, and I was like, I'll let him go with it. And you did fine. You did fine, my boy.
You crushed it though. For those who don't know, find us on Instagram at panelism.inc, and Taylor has these awesome pictures of Portugal where he was and the comic scene there, which was spectacular.
Oh, it was wonderful. But while we were away, a little movie came and is still in theaters, thankfully, that I was curious. I had mentioned briefly I had seen it to you via IM, but I don't even know if you've seen it. Have you seen and witnessed the majesty of Aquaman?
Yes. In fact, I just saw it yesterday.
Oh!
And I guess did not understand from no, I guess I knew. I don't know if I knew you'd seen it.
Yeah, no, I had sent you a message. Maybe I was unclear. I saw it. It's funny you said that. I saw it Saturday, and I was like, oh my God, this Wonder Woman and Shazam are sort of what they should have been doing this whole time. I don't even know. Personally, I don't even know if it's necessary for them. Superman and Batman may be like Spider-Man for the next 10 years. They just don't care. There's like, we won't even touch that. We'll build this out completely without them and find some new interesting way to reintroduce them down the road. Personally, I went into this Aquaman movie knowing there was goodwill and a lot of people were digging it, and hearing that it was, don't overthink it, but it is a wonderful return to sort of just the pure, non-cynical fun movies of the 90s, where it's just like, oh, this happened, anything you would have seen Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 90s or any actors like that. That's kind of what I was hearing. And it seems just when I left the theater, I had that sort of like, oh yeah, this is what it used to be like. I will say this though, when I was describing it to my wife, I said it was a perfect combination of The Little Mermaid, Kingsman, and Game of Thrones with some Tron Legacy maybe thrown in for good measure. But just a
lot of Tron.
Yeah, way more than I thought. But the Kingsman aspect of it, I'm a huge fan of that movie, as we all know, and sort of the Kingsman is the quintessential marker of just a purely unadulterated fun movie. So that's always my go-to standard. And then Aquaman it's not quite as charming, but it gets in that vein for me. I was just like, oh god, it was just having fun. It wasn't trying to be serious and meaningful. It's just like, this is a big dumb fun movie and has a lot of heart. And I actually sort of teared up at the end, but that was me. What was your review, sir?
Wow. What a surprising turn of events. I liked it. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that you bring up Kingsman because I'm not on the level of fan that you are of that movie. But on Saturday, I watched the opening scene to Golden Circle again.
Oh,
just not even thinking about Aquaman. It was on HBO and I just watched it.
The very first use, by the way, of a Prince song post his death.
Yeah, that
was the first movie to get their licensing hands on a Prince song. That's why That's why when the scene starts off, you're sort of like, wait. Why is this suddenly? What is off about this scene? Like, what is going on? And it's because we have, other than Purple Rain, our generation has never heard a movie with a Prince song. Purple Rain, Batman, circa 1989, and then what was that other Prince?
Under the Cherry Moon.
Is that the movie? It was that, but no. There's like a sequel to Purple Rain, like Alabaster Bridge or something like. You know what I'm talking about? It's hang on. This sounds Purple Rain. It's called Graffiti Bridge. There we go. So Graffiti Bridge.
That was a movie.
Rain. Yeah.
Was it like a made-for-TV movie or something?
I mean, it might as well have been. If I've seen like half of it, and I forget what the circumstances were, but it's like a very poor, like, remember back when Disney would put out like their signature animated movie, like here it is, The Little Mermaid, The Lion King, there'd be like these grand slam big movies. And then for maybe 10 years after that, through home video release, they'd be like Aladdin back in action, like just different, like maybe like 9 or 10 different sequels with like a voice cast that sounded kind of, close enough. They're never going to get Robin Williams back, which at that time was common. Now it would probably be totally different, but at the time they'd make these knockoff sort of sequels with the animation wasn't as easy. Graffiti Bridge reminds me of that for Purple Rain, where it's you get Morris Day and you get Prince, but you don't get Apollonia. Like sort of everything about the Purple Rain is gone. It's just this weird little sort of objet d'oeuvre of a movie. Anyway, why did we
were discussing Kingsman 2 and the opening scene. Which, by the way, you can hear our review of Kingsman 2. This is gonna blow your mind, in episode number 45.
Wow.
That's how long ago it was.
Wow.
A year and 4 months ago. Anyway, what struck me about that is that scene is so wild, and so much of it is CGI animated, but it still kind of swings around with the look of like a camera swinging through the car during that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of Aquaman did not, like, I was so aware during it that it looked like a video game.
Mm-hmm.
That was, and I felt that in Justice League for sure. And, maybe a little bit in Batman versus Superman, but this was just like, it was embracing like a video game aesthetic to me, which was not bad. I thought all that undersea stuff was amazing. I was quite a little thrown off that Patrick Wilson's bad guy mask looked just like his night owl mask in Watchmen. That was so, I could not look at him without going like, they just painted the night owl mask. I don't know what's happening. I was really disturbed that with Mara's heels in her boots, like that she had like lifts in her boots.
Yeah, that was weird. That was really weird.
There's one scene where she's running and he's getting his dad out of the truck and she runs over, and I just, in my head, it looks really awkward. And I thought, at this moment, Amber Heard was like, I'm about to face plant. I better be delicate. Because she just sort of like, it looks like a run, but she's moving at walk speed, kind of thing.
She got a saunter.
Like when you're on a
guys,
wet
I'm
surface
here
or something. Yeah.
A little late because of the nature of my boots, which are completely impractical for land.
Right. Or water. I mean, there's something where she's walking underwater, and I was like, God, this would be so hard to do if you're pitched forward like that. But that's stupid. That's a stupid thing to worry about. I mean, that's just what comic book movies look like. I mean, I thought it was a really fun movie. It's just not. I didn't think it was as good as Wonder Woman, and
I would agree.
It definitely they haven't synthesized the. This is how I came out of it. I'll tell you what I thought yesterday was. I came out and I went, the deal is that Marvel makes good superhero movies that are also just good movies and good superhero movie. And at this point, like, that's all DC needs to do. Like, just clear the bar.
Which this did. But I thought this did.
Oh, totally. Yeah. But it was not yet like a good movie. Like, I thought Wonder Woman was a good movie.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I have some pretty high hopes for Shazam now. But
I do too. I think that's gonna be I honestly, I have nothing like, I haven't been pining for DC to like solve this. I'm just sort of just a casual fan who's like, oh, I want them. I'd love to have something new and interesting, right? But I honestly think that like Shazam, the way I'm seeing it and the cast and everything, I think it's going to be their Guardians of the Galaxy times like 10. I think it's going to be beyond even what Aquaman's been getting in terms of sort of support. Or I think a lot of people just saw Aquaman going, oh, thank God they didn't screw it up for once. They didn't screw it up other than Wonder Woman. So I think Shazam is going to be that one little sort of thing where it's just like, holy crap, I had no idea this could be this. Like, Mark Strong is the villain, for God's sake. Mark Strong is playing Dr. Savannah. Like, that's all you need to hear. Just that alone, I'm there for. But just,
you're right.
It's going to be, I mean, I'll gladly retract that, but everything I'm seeing, and they've only sort of, the things they have leaked, the trailer has been very minimal. And this movie comes out next month. So, it's going to be...
It was like summer.
No, it's like March, isn't it? Hang on. Shazam release.
I think you're right. I'm not even thinking about March. 5th. Okay. So we got a little buffer.
A little buffer, but by this point, they should be on like their 10th trailer. But they're sort of keeping it a little under the radar, which I like. And I'm hoping that just means like we're just going to be delighted by all this, just sort of this completely non-grimdark version of that world.
Exactly. And just imagine the Flash movie they could make with Ezra Miller.
That better be. They better just drive a semi truck of money up to Robert Zemeckis' house and go, sorry, we're so sorry. Come on back. We're ready now. Whatever you want to do. I mean, because like Jesus Christ, think about every amazing Robert Zemeckis movie that you ever loved, and just imagine like that aesthetic or that personality applied to the Flash. Like, it could be ridiculously fun. And Ezra Miller's Flash at that. Everything's ready.
I do think he has to interact with other super people to really bring out the humor. So hopefully they'll team him up with some people, and it won't just be a pure solo effort. If they end up doing one,
great point. Or make him just the Hulk of the whole thing, where you just kind of keep teaming him up and spinning, putting him in different movies. Maybe he doesn't get his own movie then.
Yeah.
That could work.
Anyway,
wait, real quick. One more thing.
Oh yeah, you got one more.
I do want to point out, if you're listening and you're a He-Man fan, it's worth noting James Wan, once upon a time, I think 2-3 years ago, had been chosen to direct the whatever 19th attempt at doing a He-Man movie. Attempt, because only one has ever succeeded in actually getting made. They've been trying since then. But James Wan was going to do it, and everybody's like, oh, and there was mixed reactions. I think now, in hindsight, it would have been a genius idea, because he totally gets how these, he sort of gets the bombacity of these properties. But it was really interesting, because I think they may have even done a little pre-production. I looked at Aquaman, I was like, holy crap, half of this cast would have been his He-Man cast, like completely. It's like he almost had these binders, for casting out, He-Man. It was just like when he started doing Aquaman, I was like, well, shit, a lot of that works here too. Just the fact that even Dolph Lundgren, who was He-Man in the original 80s movie, he plays, I think, King, Mira's father. I forget his name. King, whatever.
Oh my God, that's Dolph Lundgren.
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Holy shit.
But I'm watching that going, this character, the way it's on screen looks exactly like King Randor in the He-Man lore. King Randor is, of course, if you're familiar, Prince Adam's father. Prince Adam becomes He-Man. So I'm just like, I started going down that rabbit hole going, wait, he looks like Randor.
Wow.
Hey, that's who he would have cast for Skeletor potentially. Hey, that's who he would have cast for Tila. And I was like, it all started lining up in my head. So I'm bemoaning the fact that he never got to do He-Man, because that could have been genius.
Well, I will say this. I did see Dolph's name in the credits and was like, who was he?
Oh, man.
He was great.
Yeah.
And in fact, Amber Heard totally blew away my expectations.
She was way better than I thought she would be.
Yeah. And I had no preconceived bias. I don't know anything about her. It was just her appearance in Justice League. I felt like, was just like, it just felt, green screened on like Obi-Wan talking to anyone in the prequels, like it's just like, are you even on the set with Jason Momoa? Like, it was so weird, They
probably shoved her in a room for like an afternoon and say, hey, we need you to do these lines, go. And she's like, what's the context? It doesn't matter. We're going to write that later. We'll make it up after the fact.
Imagine all of this is an undersea something or other. We haven't designed it yet, but
imagine you're talking to the villain, then to the hero. Like, it could be any of those people. You don't even know. It could be Congress, just whatever it is. Just say,
well, all right. This is all actually a pretty good segue into the book that I've chosen to talk about, and I think this is we almost had that decision paralysis of like, how do we memorialize episodes 99 and 100, and then we ended up not planning it at all and miscounting, and so I think this is like this is a really good episode 99. I hope. I'm going to talk about a legendary DC book that I had not read until 2 weeks ago, called Crisis on Infinite Earths.
It's finally happening. This is one of those titles that I feel like when we did, I think I reviewed
Kingdom Come.
I kind of felt the same way, where I was like, I sheepishly was like, I had not read this yet. I feel like Crisis is one of those books where it's like, hardened comic book fans are looking at us going, wait, you hadn't read it yet?
Exactly. That's exactly how I felt for many years. Let me give you a quick TLDR on it. Just don't even read it.
Oh, wow. Oh my God.
But I would love to get into my thoughts on why I have that opinion.
Is this like Infinity Gauntlet, like the original original Infinity Thanos thing, where you're just like, you kind of think, oh, this is like a crucial sort of piece of the Marvel lore, and then you're reading it going, oh, how did this ever get totally successful? So it's the same kind of book.
So
all right,
written by Marv Wolfman, illustrated by George Perez. This is the team that did the Teen Titans back when I was reading them in the 80s. And I'm not quick enough with our list stuff, but I did talk about the Teen Titans, the game that they got back together 10 years ago or something, and did a Teen Titans book to sort of wrap up what they talked about. It's in episode number 61, by the way. It was Crisis was published in 1985. Having read it now, I want to go back to the game, because I remember in that episode feeling so frustrated with myself that I couldn't talk about it very well. And it's one of those things of like, I think I had just sort of, I had remembered liking Teen Titans so much, and then to read a current era book written by them with those same characters, it just, something didn't fit. And it, that was the thing that kind of got me stuck. Like, what, do I like what my enjoyment was and my nostalgia were sort of, at odds. So I went into this with no nostalgia for Crisis on Infinite Earths. I knew why it was written and what it was supposedly written for. I have looked at it forever on the shelf and at a comic book store and thought, I just got to buy it. And it's one of those really, thick collections of, I actually think it's that many issues, but it's just it's a big fat collection. And and I've always hesitated because I tried to struggle through Nightfall from Batman. I'll talk about that maybe in some episode. And I've also tried to struggle through all of the Civil War tie-ins, not even Civil War 2.
Wow.
And similarly failed at that. But this, it's a big book, and I didn't even think about it until Amazon did a Black Friday sale on DC books. And I grabbed this one. I grabbed Kingdom Come also. And I thought like, hey, this is good fodder for panelism. Like, I can just start going through these seriously, like, greatest comic book arcs and talking about them. So here we are. Here's Crisis. I read it on, it was a struggle to get through. So I couldn't even read it in a day of traveling, which I've done with several novels and things like that, as we've talked about on the podcast. Like, ordinarily sitting down and reading a novel, you know, in the time it takes me to fly across the country is like, that's not a big deal to me. I can read for that long while traveling. This was like, oh my God, I kept closing it and opening it back up, and I'm taking notes the whole time because, as I will get into, I had a lot of thoughts at the time. And I also don't do that. I usually don't do notes until after I've completed the whole thing, because I don't want to interrupt the read, you know? Then I get off the plane and I text you and say, I've got the most racist comic book to discuss on our next episode.
And I was so shocked to learn that it was this. Like, that is the last thing I would ever expect to hear about Crisis on Infinite Earths. So now, okay, let's start with that.
Let me give you a slight intro, because I asked before we started recording if you knew like why it was written. And so, just for the edification of our listeners, the DC did this, you know, this thing that like everybody does, like in their fantasy system. They have like a beloved hero, but they've, you know, some other writer has done a different version of that, and they don't want to like sort of end the one version because they've got this newer version. And so DC had a multiverse. In fact, you've talked about Multiversity before, which was a Grant Morrison experiment with some characters.
One of my favorites.
Yeah. But they, you know, back in the 80s, and there is a really good introduction written by George Perez at the beginning of this book, because this is I read the republished version. So, you know, it's kind of remastered. It's got a bunch of DVD extras at the back. But he has this big long letter of like how it had all been sort of like, you know, all these ideas have been collecting, and he finally pitched it to DC. The idea was, let's do one big team up book. And this was sort of before the era of team up books and event books. You know, this was like the first big one. And the idea was, let's synthesize all the universes into one. Let's get rid of all of these, you know, conflicts. And there's, you know, we're not going to have an Earth 1 Superman and an Earth 2 Superman. We're going to have one Superman, and we're going to have, you know,
this was a decision driven by creative interest and necessity, not from, oh my God, our sales are down, what can we do to juice things up? What's our sweeps week show? You know, like
that's what Perez would have you believe.
All right. Well,
I'm not cynical about it. Like, I didn't read it
because they do that like, now. That's when they bust that shit. I mean, Doomsday Clock is nothing but that. I'm sorry.
Right. Civil War 2. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I do think it was a more innocent time. And they were less cynical about it. I'm sure that it succeeded in its pitch because it did make sense sales wise. Like, you know, we're marketing 3 different Supermans. This is freaking crazy. Like, we need, you know, we need one book. So that's the, you know, you go into it knowing that it is a story that has been written to solve a publishing problem, I guess.
Okay.
You know, and not that doesn't make it an interesting creative problem, but it is, you know, it's not just sort of written for the joy of the plot that he dreamed up. It's like he had these characters that he'd wanted to write for a while, and he didn't know how to, you know, put their power in the right setting. So it did give him a good, like, it did kind of, you know, according to his intro story, it all kind of fell into place once he figured out, I could write this story if we combined all the universes. So, so that's where I think the Infinity Gauntlet stuff, the comparison is really apt, because there's going to be a whole bunch of space stuff, you know, in this book, you know, that going in, and it's 1985 when this came out. So it is, the art style is very 1985 DC, you know.
Okay.
There's a real big nod to all of Jack Kirby's, like, you know, tech drawings where, you know, there's these spaceships or big, you know, fortresses on planets or asteroids or whatever, and they're just drawn in that way where it's like, it doesn't look like any tech that you've ever seen. You know, there's all these like different circles and lines and, you know, shapes drawn on it, and you're really unclear of like, are these buttons, or do you just have all these weird details sticking out? So it's in that style. And I'll jump right into the racist thing now. as I start reading it, I'm just because of the comics that we read these days, I was really struck by all the white faces in it. Like it is just everyone is a white person. And I think I told you before we started recording too, where it's sort of like I get to like page 2 and I went, was that racist? And then I was like, no, you're being too sensitive.
No,
and
wait,
then,
when you say everybody, do you mean like just like people down the street? Like
everyone, all the heroes. And this is where it really stood out. So when you first meet at this time in the 80s, Hal Jordan was not Earth's Green Lantern. John Stewart was. And
John Stewart was around at this time. Okay.
Yes, and he was black.
Yeah.
And so he appears in some of the early like superhero, montage kind of stuff there. But what struck me was like, as I'm staring at all these white faces, I was like, well, there's Green Lantern. Like that disproves your theory. And then I went, they're showing him from the back. Like there would be all these heroes from the front. And then you're seeing he's, not in a way that didn't make sense for the story being told in that panel, but just interesting. Like you don't have a black face in this, and you have a Green Lantern that we all know is black. And as the note I made was that he is shown from the back in 3 of the first panels that he's in.
Interesting.
So you don't see a black face. Like there's one of I put 3 of 4 because it's not like, the first 4. It's like 1, 2, you see his back, and then you see his face, and then the 4th one you see his back again.
I love the way you're describing this is very much like the movie JFK, where Kevin Costner is explaining how down and to the right, down. It's like it's just slightly conspiratorial sounding, but I believe you. I believe that this is all. I love.
I'm picking it apart like a term paper on. The minority representation in 80s event superhero books. But yeah, you don't see a black face. And, and then I'm like sort of racking my brain as I'm reading it. I'm like, okay, well, I think Black Lightning's around at that time. And yeah, he shows up. Black Lightning shows up in this. And then I notice when he shows up that only John Stewart and Black Lightning drop their G's when they're talking.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, oh my God. And the bad dialect stuff just starts from there. Like it's just
Black Lightning, you a bad hombre.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's this, and it's this is all going to be about the context of it. But there's like that was very apparent when that happens. And so then at this point, I'm going, is this book racist? And there's a couple racist things in here. They go to an ape city in Africa.
Oh my heavens.
And I was like, you have to be fucking kidding me.
No, wait.
DC had like an existing ape city that was specifically based in Africa?
Is that not how we get Gorilla Grodd? I mean, like, where is he from? Is that...
I don't know. Is that a DC thing?
Yes, Gorilla Grodd is yes, definitely. Gorilla Grodd he's even appeared in Flash episodes on the TV series.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh, you're right. I don't know, but it was just in the context of that where I went, this is not good.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not like the writers made up that part of the universe and just inserted this city there. Like that was a thing that DC had. They had these super smart apes, and they had their own, like they're smarter than the humans. Like they're more technologically advanced and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, the story takes them there because what Crisis is going to do is it's going to land in like, it's jumping around to all the big points of the DC universe. So I think part of the wonder of it at the time was, wow, they are bringing in stuff that like you don't even think of as being in a superhero book, or, like if it is, it's a weird one-off or a what if kind of book. It's not like this is all, no, they exist in the same universe and all this is happening, so that, that obviously that's the radar is like alerting me to all the terrible things. Then Sergeant Rock, which is like, and I think they're called the Howlin' Commandos, or is that the Marvel thing? I don't know.
That's Marvel. Wait. Somebody told me that there was a Howlin' Commandos. Maybe it's the same thing, that they're all like the Wolfman and like the Mummy.
No, that's not this.
Okay.
But Sergeant Rock was like their World War II character.
Okay.
And it's just so they could have a World War II book. Well, he shows up because there's this weird time travel thing back to World War II. And so he's fighting off the Nazis. And there's this really strange thing that anyone would pick up on in this day and age, which is that their tank flies the Confederate battle flag.
Wow.
And it is absolutely prominent in every panel, and not prominent like it's up in your face. It's like, even if it's way in the background, even if this tank is way in the background, they have made a point to draw a rectangle, with red triangles and a blue cross, X.
So this is less like, hey, like, am I being overly sensitive to it? And more like when you're watching one of those Bugs Bunny cartoons from the 40s, and you see like a Japanese person come into frame, you're like, whoa,
right.
What is going on in this cartoon? It's almost like that, where you're a little shocked that this sort of cultural thing that you thought was immune.
I think that's where you've nailed it. It is all the cultural thing, and it's just so strange in our present day to look back at something like that, especially something that is sort of like rooted. This whole storyline is rooted in the diversity of their universe, and so
that's right. Wow, I never even thought of that.
Yeah, to be so unself-aware as you're doing that is like, there's no reason to have Sergeant Rock in this, and I'll get to more of the time travel stuff.
Yeah, but that's usually, I'm just surprised that in what's considered a seminal title, that sort of is very definitive in terms of the canon of DC lore, that they'd bring in somebody as inconsequential as Sergeant Rock,
right?
Be to have FaceTime. It's like, who should we get that nobody knows or has remembered? I know,
and it brings up this weird historical thing now to me, because as a Southerner, as a person who grew up around this dumb flag, the thing, okay, so you picture 1985. I don't know the World War II history. I don't know that we had tanks drive around flying the battle flag. I don't know, because what I know about the history of the Confederate battle flag. So for starters, sorry for this divergence, but you went to school in Nashville, and you can appreciate it. But this is not the flag of the states, of the Confederate States of America. This is the battle flag that they took to battle. This is specifically we hate black people, and this is the flag under which we're going to show that. And if you don't believe that was a reason for the Southern aggression in the Civil War, then you need to read what the Southern states wrote themselves in their articles of secession, because they all mention slavery. That is exactly why they seceded. It is not a war about other things or states' rights. It's about slavery.
You're listening to Panelism, everybody.
I know.
Podcast
a story about
comics and graphic novels are having on here.
So, sorry for my Southern passion about this issue comes out on that. It is inherently a racist symbol. And to have, someone flying a racist symbol fighting the Nazis, who are the personification of racist evil, is who am I rooting for here?
That does seem so strange, right?
Can you both wipe each other out? If
there's not even you'd think there'd be a tank with the Star of David or something,
Oh my God. Really piss these Nazis off.
Yeah.
What if the Nazis were hey, wave the white flag. Hey, you hate black people. We do too. Let's all get along.
Wow.
You're on our side. If I'm a superhero from the future that goes back to this, I would be fuck this guy.
So wait, well, there's a good point. Is that the setup? Is this the past is so screwed up that this dude from the Civil War is fighting the Nazis? It's the past has come out of alignment. Somebody needs to go back and set things right. Is that where we start off?
That would be so awesome. I wish the superheroes went back and literally just wiped out Sergeant Rock's platoon. That there's a confusing bit. I don't know about the continuity issue at this point, but it's alluded to that Sergeant Rock's universe, World War II never ended. So they've been fighting it for an additional 30 years or something. But that's a weird, I think, retcon kind of thing, because they're all using World War II appropriate technology. So it's not like the world advanced for 30 years. It's just this weird, retcon that DC put in there so they could keep making a World War II book in the 80s, which is also just weird. But again, if you think God, that's Todd, you're being too sensitive. That's not really racist. Well, a couple pages later, they're back in the Old West. And this is straight from my notes. Some fucking cowboy just called a Native American a half-breed scalp hunter.
Oh my God. Wait, okay. Wait, whoa.
So I was like, how did they even get away with that in the 80s? And right after that, or right before it, another cowboy character calls John Stewart a colored man.
Now, are we sure that they're not trying to historically depict what people did say?
No, I mean, I think they are in a way. It's just like, guys, the lack of self-awareness here. Like, just to have one page where they call John Stewart a colored man, which I know from being, a youth in the 80s was not acceptable in 1985. I mean,
your black friends were not really going to be fans of that if you were.
No, and again, you're like, well, it was a cowboy, and they're trying to write. It's like, dude, I don't know that you get. Imagine
being a young black kid, 13-year-old kid in the 80s, going through this, like, what? I just, unless John Stewart pops him at the cowboy in the mouth in the next panel, like you flip the page, it's like, oh, ha, that doesn't happen, I'm guessing. So
no, of course not.
Why are they bombing around World War II in the Old West? Like, why is it that what I'm not hearing at all yet is mention of any hero outside of John Stewart's backside?
Well,
like, what's
the problem is that they're all there, but there is a really weird thing that, granted, I think at the time it was cool because a lot of the minor heroes start taking a more major role in the inciting events of this.
Okay.
So the ones that originally go back in time and stuff like that and do these jumps are like Blue Beetles there and that Green Lantern, and it's not like the big core group that it's not. I mean, Green Lantern is Justice League, but it's not Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. It's sort of like they're there, but they're sort of getting pulled in a little bit later. So maybe I should talk about the mechanics of the plot, which I still don't totally understand. But basically, there's this guy that you sort of originally assume is an evil person named the Monitor, and he is the one.
Nick Wotan?
I'm sorry?
Is this Nick Wotan? Is this the black guy Monitor? That's?
Oh wait, is that a thing? I don't know about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, never mind. So in the multiversity and in other medium, and I think they're even trying to bring him into one of the CW shows. But there's a guy. There's like one of the monitors is named Nick Wotan, and he's this really cool looking character. He doesn't look like the robot Monitor, but he kind of has like a similar costume. I just didn't know if I'm curious because I didn't know what the first mention of him was. If it's not this, it must have been further along in the timeline.
Well, Perez, I believe, created this character and used him in other books, and so this was but he sort of had this idea that he was bigger than all of that idea. So I can't believe I've talked so much about the racism, haven't even talked about the actual mechanics of the book. But it starts out where just worlds are being erased. It's like Thanos in slow motion. And there's this one character whose name I did not write down and totally escapes me right now. Oh my God. I'm trying to look at it and I don't see it. Oh, what is this guy's name? Anyway, he's being forced to, he just sort of disappears in time and space. And when that happens to him, he knows he's about to witness a world being destroyed. So then he reappears wherever that world is getting destroyed and has to witness all of these people just sort of disappearing, so as this is happening, you were jumping from Earth to Earth and universe to universe, and finding heroes that may have been sort of like they were inside DC books, but they were sort of imaginary or whatever. Like there's a Superman Green Lantern copycat team where Superman is called Ultraman and Green Lantern is called Power Ring, and and they're the bad guys. I forgot about that.
Okay.
On this Earth, whatever Earth it is, and Lex Luthor is the hero. So Lex Luthor has his son Alexander, who is a baby, and in Superman style, he has built a device that will go through his universe, like it will arrive in the different universe. So he sends Alexander, the baby, on that out of his universe. So he will be spared it being wiped out.
Wow.
And as part of that,
it's kind of cool.
Because Alexander leaves that plane and has to travel through the destruction, he inherits, like he becomes part antimatter and part matter. And so he's able to channel that. So he ends up with the Monitor. The Monitor sort of grooms him, and then they recruit these heroes and explain to them what's going on. And the heroes, of course, have noticed, like, hey, shit's going crazy. So they the Monitor, he has this story. Oh, he has this other character called the Harbinger, and I can't even remember exactly what she does. I only just read this book, but wow. Oh man, in Infinity Gauntlet, I'm trying to rack my brains to, like, there were characters that became crucial to Thanos in that book that you seemingly have no history with.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what happens here, is that maybe the Monitor had been in some other books. But
they treat him like he's been, like he's it's your friend. You saw him in the last book. I mean, they give him sort of that familiarity hasn't at all been earned. And that kind of drives me nuts from time to time. I've read stories like that too, where it's like, how am I supposed to know? And like, who is this? And it's the answer is like this. It's new, but they just sort of treat it. They roll with it like, oh yeah, this is.
And it's supposed to be like really fearful. But the thing is, like, if you don't have any history with that character, I don't. And it's also one of those things where it's very fantasy and video game-esque, of like, oh, here's this big bad that you have no history with that is already, their stats are like already so overpowered that your hero can't win against it. And you're like, well, I don't, who cares? Like, at that point, you're just like, well, whatever, just wipe out the earth, because like we can't do it. So like, let's run the odds on this. I just looked up the character I was trying to think of was Pariah. It's Pariah that keeps getting pulled from World War. Okay. So he becomes instrumental in this other way too. But basically, you're left with these three people: Pariah, Harbinger, and the Monitor, and you don't really know, like, it's not even a case of like them playing the tone of like, oh, you don't know whose side they're on. It's just like, I don't care. They seem limitlessly powerful, and we have no history with them. Like, we don't know them as humans or anything. They're all white people, of course, because even in like the far reaches of space and time,
wow,
you can only still find like two white men and a white woman.
Was this a coloring issue where there's like, oh, we ran out of coloring budget, just put it out? Like, would this have just been better as black and white? Just put it out that way.
So the other thing that's real famous about this book is that it killed certain really prominent heroes, and it brought in sort of new heroes. They got to introduce new heroes, and but so again, when you're like, wow, that's you're being too sensitive, Todd. There's a part where the Monitor creates a new Dr. Light. And I can't remember how Dr. Light ended in this, because he's back in Identity Crisis, like, 20 years later or whatever. Anyway, but Dr. Light is gone in this universe. So he needs to create a new person with the powers of Dr. Light. So he finds this Japanese woman, the scientist, and imbues her like there's an accident or whatever. And she gets all the powers of Dr. Light. The Monitor has arranged this. And people keep referring to her as the female Dr. Light.
Oh my God.
Like, that's her name. It's like bolded.
Female Doctor, Lady Dr. Light.
I know.
Wow.
Oh my God. And there's then like Wildcat gets terribly injured. And this woman that, again, I don't know if she was already in continuity. I've never seen her before, but she takes on his costume because she was friends with him. And she's like, the world. Oh yeah. Yolanda Montez. And she's like, I'm no longer Yolanda Montez. I'm the new Wildcat.
Okay.
And then people will eventually refer to it as like, oh, the new Wildcat. You're like, no, it's just Wildcat, or give her a different name. I don't get it. Like, this is so lame and so fundamentally like the way the DC and Marvel probably both in the 80s approached comics. They just, all the names just stayed the same, but they would sort of move people into the costumes when they needed diversity or whatever. I mean, I guess it is nice that it's a Latino woman that becomes the new Wildcat, but that's not it's just so weird. So it's also famous for it kills Supergirl. And that's
the cover you always see is Superman standing there holding a dead, or what you assumed is a deceased Supergirl.
Right. So the scene in which that happens when Supergirl dies is one of the few with any like character movement really at all. Like it's just so, I mean, I think I'm just dancing around saying badly written. And I get that it was written in the times, like, and I'm not even talking about the sexism or the racism or just the genre itself was just, when I reviewed that Stan Lee Catwoman a few episodes ago, and I talked about how there were like, she would say things that should have been in a thought bubble or like a narrative box, but she would just say things like, "Thank God that green lightning gave me these powers." So the Supergirl death scene is one of the few where there's like actual character interaction, even though she's saying, thoughts. She's, "Oh, Clark, you taught me the best. And, I will go, I'm going to jump into this danger, even though I know it's dangerous," or whatever. And she dies, but it's just, there are so many heroes in this, and there's very, very little space at all to give that any real emotional weight. Like everything, I mean, whole worlds are getting wiped out, and she takes a blast from this bad guy, and Superman comes out like holding her body. So, I mean, like literally like billions of people have been killed. So it's really weird. And I think the Flash story is much more interesting and actually like emotionally resonant. And it's actually a very clever thing, which again, I don't know if it was already in continuity, but he's using the Speed Force to move through time and the multiverse. So I'm assuming they introduced that power at one point, but there is really great foreshadowing in that, like at the beginning of the book, Batman sees, Flash talk to him. And then, and Batman's like, "Where are you? What's going on? Like, how did you, like, there's just sort of this image of the Flash that appears in front of him." Which
later, if you don't remember, appears in the Batman v Superman movie.
Yes.
Where the Flash kind of, same sort of, he projects himself, or Batman imagines he talks to him. So that's where that came from.
Yeah. And again, see, I don't know how many times that's happened or if that was specifically a nod in Justice League, the Batman v Superman. If that was a nod to Crisis, or is that just a thing that Flash does? But Flash, he dies, but at every like time of him dying, he's projecting himself into one of these other universes. So various people are encountering Flash at different ages. And there's another super cheesy scene where Wally, he's mourning the death of Flash, but he takes his power ring, or not his power ring, but the ring that holds his costume. And he's like, "You know what? No longer am I Kid Flash. I'm now the Flash." And he puts the Flash's uniform on. Very confusing because Jay Garrick, the old Flash, is also in this universe.
Interesting.
And he's just Flash. Like, he survives. He's just living on Earth now. So
there's gonna be a trademark dispute somewhere there along the way.
Yeah, to get a little bit more. So I'm also dancing around the idea that there's just. I get that it was written for the time, but it's badly written. And one of the problems with that I can say specifically about how it's badly written is the superheroes themselves never figure out anything. There's literally this just deus ex machina in the Monitor who shows up to explain the whole thing that's going on. And while there are some clever little things, like it's not, but the Flash thing is clever. The Harbinger thing isn't really clever. I mean, you can see it from like a mile away, but she ends up killing the Monitor. But of course, that was the Monitor's plan all along because he had to move his energy from his body and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but there are some narrative hooks like that that are good, but the heroes themselves have no agency. when they come up against these, like the antimatter is just like a white wave that is taking over planets. It's like a wall. And they will just fly up to it and they'll all shoot their beams at it. You know, and it's like green arrows just shooting arrows into the antimatter. And you're like, why don't you guys have a conversation for like 10 minutes and you'll figure out how useless that is. Yeah. So again, like a lot of the, you know, the quote, like deaths that happen, you're like, well, yeah, just get the fuck away from the antimatter. Like it's so obvious. I mean, not that the planet can be, you know, saved, but like you running into the antimatter is not going to do anything.
It almost sounds like the parodies you see when they like sort of other shows spoof like hero teams. It kind of like this is the sort of antics where it's like, look, a white wall, shoot it with your power, and they're just like you hopelessly trying to battle it back. Like we did it, you know. And then they go home and the threat is still obviously there. They didn't do jack.
And so, we find out that this antimatter is actually being driven by. Wait for it. The anti-monitor.
Okay.
Like there's literally a character called the anti-monitor. And there's this whole story that some character talks about these two brothers that like, I think it's one of the Green Lantern, whatever those old guys are, the little blue.
The Guardians.
Like the Smurfs, yeah. They, so the Guardians like explain the whole monitor, anti-monitor thing. You know, and they represent the yin and yang of the universe or whatever. But it's still like, okay, so now there's two gods that are having a war in a multiverse, and you're just throwing humans at it all the time. Like it's just,
but no top metahumans. They have abilities and things. And that's clearly...
I did. So while I'm reading this, I read it digitally. We'll get to that, and I'm taking screenshots of like for more writing bad examples. This is one single panel I'm gonna read to you, which is Supergirl fighting her last battle. She says, all my life, I've considered life the greatest of gifts, but you're a blasphemy of life.
Oh my God.
You don't deserve to survive. And the anti-monitor says, stop it. You are destroying my life shell. Okay. That's 4 lives in one panel.
Wow.
Not even a page. Like this is one tiny panel. Then there's
we should do it. What we should do is I'm going to reread it now, imagining that everybody's just drunk the whole time and just see.
Oh, I got a perfect panel for that.
All right.
Marvin Martian, or whatever his name is, the Martian Manhunter, he says, we Martians do not get cold. Why do you ask? And Firestorm says, sheesh, Mars doesn't need women. What they need is a sense of humor.
Oh my God.
This is another single panel I clipped, which was Wonder Girl talking to Firehawk. And Wonder Girl says, so Firehawk says, I want to go with you on this mission. And Wonder Girl says, no, thanks, Firehawk. I'll be fine in there by myself. And Firehawk says, I insist. I'd love to explore in there anyway. And then Wonder Girl says, well, actually, I wouldn't mind some company. This is exactly what happens when I role play with my 7-year-old niece, where I'm like, we got to get to this thing. And she goes, no, you don't want to do that. I'm like, yeah, but they've got Batman captured. And she goes, yeah, let's go. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move the story along. You know, like we don't need to,
we don't need to have these weird wonder that when Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns came out, that it was such a revelation, especially Watchmen. I mean, this is the environment we were in.
Yeah.
You know, 2 years prior.
That is such a wonderful point. I'm so glad you said that. I had thought about the Watchmen era, but I wasn't even placing it in the same year. You're right. Like we had Watchmen.
Yeah, that came out 2 years later. We were almost there, and like both of those books came out relatively close to each other, if I'm not mistaken. I forget if
oh my gosh,
it's 86 or 88. I think it's 88.
I wonder how much Alan Moore felt about when he read this and went, Jesus Christ, that's terrible. And he wrote
I mean, I can't imagine. I think, I'll do you one even better. When did Arkham Asylum come out? I mean, talk about tonal shift. Was that like 90, 89? Hang on. I gotta look this up.
Yeah. I'll tell you, there's a, one of the other panels I screen capped because I thought it was so funny was, so Supergirl dies. I just made this bullet that said, I'm imagine me on the plane reading this book, and I flip over to Google Docs and write, wow, this is surprisingly not that sexist. And then I have another bullet, and then there's that shot of Supergirl's ass.
Oh no.
And then the next bullet I have is Supergirl's name was Linda.
Linda what?
I don't know. He calls her Linda at one point. So the reason it's not that sexist is because there just aren't that many women characters.
Mm-hmm. That's how you solve that. Just don't even have them. Just no women at all. That way the men can get back to doing what they do.
Yeah,
drinking and talking about
a perfect example of that. Oh, two examples right there that I've got bulleted. One is that Lila, who is the Harbinger, loves the Monitor, and when she kills him, she's so upset. Like she doesn't understand it's part of his plan, and she's been controlled by this power, and she kills him. Blah blah blah. But as you're reading, I'm like, as I'm thinking about the sexism in it, I made a note like, oh, I forgot that Lila keeps saying that she loves the Monitor. But in the beginning of the book, she talks about how he treated her like a slave. Like, what kind of fucked up stuff is that? There's this other character that I can't even remember. So, some dude that manipulates emotions, and he manipulates this ice queen whose name I don't even remember, but her power is that she's Iceman, but she's, whatever. It's like the same exact thing. And he manipulates her from being evil to falling in love with Firestorm. And so there's this whole thing where Firestorm is just like negging her like crazy. and it's so weird. Like, I don't know. It's just played like little kids, playing,
none of that sounds like it serves the plot at all. Like no. Like so many tangential little side, just whatever was on their mind at any given time. By the way, Arkham Asylum, the book was October 1989. So we were 4 years away from that.
Yeah.
When this came out,
I think Dark Knight was 86. I think you're right on that.
86, and then Watchmen was 87, I believe.
Yeah, which are not like paragons of equality by any stretch of the imagination, but they are good writing.
Oh,
and this is like the prototypical event book, and it is just such bad writing, in that it doesn't really investigate its own, past of sexism and racism, like in these comics that he's bringing into this universe. Mm-hmm. And it's just like flat out bad action. Like, it's just, I can't believe that an editor let him get away with that, using life 4 times in a panel. I can't believe that an editor was like when he just has all the heroes, like there's a part where all the Legion of Superheroes, but all of them do this, but the Legion specifically, where they all just go shoot their powers at the antimatter. And it's like, man, if I were the editor, I would have been like, hey, I'm sending this panel back. This is fucking stupid. Like, come up with some clever thing for them to do. If nothing else, just rescue people. Like, acknowledge, like, we can't beat a wall and a wall of antimatter that is creeping over the planet. So let's just get people away from it. You can fucking fly, and you're just letting people get wiped out by antimatter while you're shooting beams at it. It is so stupid.
Why do you think it's still heralded as sort of a seminal piece? Is it simply because it was the first style book of this nature? Because you can't with a critical eye obviously look at this and go, oh, this was like, you can, like, again, I'll use Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns as an example. They're usually held up as like, these were the first times we saw comic books or graphic novels, as literary works. You're not going to say that about this. What is it?
A great question. And it is not held up for this reason, but I think what justifies talking about it and ranting about it in our show is that this is like the turning point. I think I've talked to you. I don't think we ever talked about this on the podcast, and I can't remember who said it, but I think it's on. Okay, so there's a podcast called The Canon. I think it's Amy Nicholson that does that. And it's all about like people bring a movie to her and have to make their case for why it should be included in the canon of great films.
Oh, fun.
Someone brings Point Break to her, and she's like, oh, okay, I get it, funny. And they're like, let me hit you with this. This is the moment, like, it's directed by Catherine Bigelow, who at the time is married to James Cameron. Mm-hmm. It comes out, I think, even the same weekend as Terminator 2.
Oh, wow.
Terminator 2 is the like last paragon of the 80s action hero. Like, after that, Schwarzenegger becomes like a parody. He starts doing comedies, and he does The Last Action Hero, which is like a parody of his own movies.
Yeah.
And Point Break is the introduction of a skinny geek as the new action hero. Because after that, Keanu Reeves goes on to do Speed and Matrix, and like, he becomes the, like, before him.
Wow, what a great point.
Yeah, and I like Amy Nicholson's like blown away when when that was pitched that way. Like, this is the moment where it all changed. And I think Crisis in that way is the old guard. Like, this is the dumb superhero comic writing, and Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen are saying this is what it can be.
Yeah,
because that's why I think we need to look at it critically like this. Of like,
this is sort of the last of the old cycle.
Right. Don't memorialize this. Don't think it was somehow, like some great achievement on its own. I mean, it is in for a whole lot of technical reasons and business reasons too. But story-wise, writing-wise, like, this is not good. And it's not worth having on your shelf. Yeah.
Wow, that is the thumbs down from us. It's not worth having on your shelf. Just take it away.
I'll quickly hit some other bullets.
All right.
On the sexism point, in the way, like in a thing that they could have corrected in 1985, is that Superman speaks Japanese. Did you know that?
I mean, he's Superman. He's of the world. I thought he could.
He does this like right after Katana is like, "There's nothing for me to do here." I think she even literally says that. There's one hilarious note I made, which is so after Supergirl dies, there's a panel of Clark reading the news,
just hanging out.
I'm like, well, okay, one, he went back to work after that. Like,
did he know at that point though? Had he been told? I mean, yeah, he must have.
No, Clark, he was there.
Yeah.
Like, he carries her body out.
So he's
and then he flies back to Earth that's about to be destroyed by the antimatter and goes to his day job.
That's amazing.
And so but it's a shot of him reading the news, but in the foreground is the editor saying, "What's with Kent? He's so cold." And then Lana says, "Yeah, he's been that way ever since he heard about Supergirl's death." Clark, what the fuck, man? Take a day off.
Oh, wow.
There's
I gotta work.
I made this whole series of bullets about event books, and it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't in ways that, like, when time merges, which is what's happening, is these Earths are literally coming together, like they're starting to vibrate at the same frequency, so they will eventually just destroy each other because they're going to vibrate over top of each other. But what's happening is, like, on each Earth, things from different Earths or planes or time periods are appearing, like the World War II people might appear in present day Manhattan or something. But when time merges, there's only like one of each person from every universe. Like, there's not, I mean, it's just so weird and like not well thought out. Why aren't there 400 Supermans?
Yeah.
Or something like that. Like, one of the things, and also one of the things that happens with that time is that it's, I mean, not to be nitpicky, but it's only times where DC had a property in that time. Like, the Western stuff is only whatever that Jonah Hex, Western character is vibrating into the modern day. And the Sergeant Rock is the only World War II thing that comes out. Like, if there's a whole planet where World War II never ended, how come that whole planet didn't vibrate onto Earth 1, or something? I mean, granted, you can't do that, but there's no explanation of why these are the things they chose besides, DC owns a comic book about that and they wanted to make sense. So again, like, why didn't the editor go, forget that. We don't really have a continuity problem with Sergeant Rock. Just put the Supermans together.
Yeah. That's what I love the multiverse. See, now you really got to go read the Multiversity. Yeah. Because Grant Morrison utilized a lot of stuff that was canon already and then invented a lot of new stuff on top of that one, because there's this actually, I posted on Instagram over the weekend. There's this Multiversity guidebook that walks you through all the different Earths that have either been discovered or are known. There's a couple that aren't known, which is interesting that he sort of has a kind of question mark over. But his take on so many different characters. Like, there's a black Superman who's the president in his universe. There's a Superman who's basically a vampire. There's a Superman who's like, it's a small little child Superman. They're all the heroes of little children. Like, just the weirdness of all the different variations, but the fact that it's in every Superman, in every universe, there's basically this equivalent character, more or less.
Yeah. And I think that is just, that's Grant Morrison, and that's the new guard.
Yeah.
And this is like the old guard like just hitting its, its wall of like, I can't imagine in 1985, this must have seemed like a crazy good idea.
Oh yeah.
But I just, as the drafts start coming in, I just don't understand how even at that time, I mean, because the Terminator, the movie already existed at that point.
Oh,
and
you're right.
That handles time travel in such a better way than this does. Wait, am I wrong about that? Maybe Terminator.
No, that was 81. 81, I think, is Terminator.
Really? I think
it's before this. I promise you.
Yeah, but T2 is 90.
Yeah, they took a while.
Or 89.
Maybe Terminator 1 was before this. It was pre 1985 because Back to the Future was 85, and that was long after Terminator 1.
And you think about, like, you write a comic like you write a movie, like there's a script,
Yeah.
And
you should anyway. That's how you preferable.
Even just a cursory glance at a movie script, you would realize, like, oh, we don't, movies are bad when they insert one narrator to tell you all the exposition. And that's what happens here. Like, the exposition just comes all at once from one of those three totally new characters, Monitor, Harbinger, or Pariah. The heroes never learn anything on their own. Batman, the world's greatest detective, hasn't figured out anything. They're just told, and then they don't, they lack the agency to do anything but just shoot at it. Like, they're just, they're just blunt instruments.
Yeah.
And,
Christ. All right,
it's, I just found it impenetrable. And I think I'd written a conclusion here, but I think I've
impenetrable. I like that. One word review. Impenetrable. Todd, hey.
Just that thing of, like, where the danger is so big that you can't stop it. And so you have to have some Deus Ex Machina has to come out to fix it. It's so, anyway, it's so strange. And the conclusion I wrote is something I've already said, which is, like, if you, it is racist and sexist because it fails to examine the power structures of its own time. And especially when you're talking about a comic book that, like I already pointed out, is about diversity and is about power. It's like, what a great place to examine that. And I get in the mindset of, the writer, like, he just wasn't self-aware of that. He wasn't aware of his own privilege to sort of operate in that system. And so it's hard to blame the individual and or is he just a product of his system? But it's such a missed opportunity. And as you and I have repeated many times, like, just to see that, like, Watchmen, Dark Knight are around the corner. God, I bet Frank Miller's Daredevil had already come out at this point.
Oh yeah.
So, like,
or it was straddle, it went alongside it. So yeah,
and Alan Moore had I bet V for Vendetta came out before this. Like, other stuff was out there. And yeah, you made a great point of, like, why is this still so revered? And I'm just here to say, like, don't revere it. Like, it's not worth having on your shelf. It's just
that I will go back to impenetrable. I think that is a great. It says so much, and it's so compact of a thing. What would you recommend if you're fans of this? You're fans of other books will like this. What would you say?
On our little note sheet where we say recommended if you like, I put garbage event books and probably Civil War II.
All right. So, and you know what? There's no shame necessarily in that. These books are almost kind of like the Harlequin romance novels of the comics world. It's like, oh well, I got to see what's going on in my stories. You sort of acknowledge, because Fabio's on the cover, that this is going to only mean a certain quality.
It should definitely show you how good comics are today. Like, the fact that we can feel for characters. I mean, the fact that, like, the Aquaman movie has you tear up at the end. Like, this is. There's no human connection in here. That's just the biggest deal. And I just, it's so weird to go back and revisit that and go, oh my God, none of these people are three-dimensional. And, I don't know, at some point, and this is where it should inform current movies, is at some point you should go, whoa, that's way too many characters. We can't make any of them human if there's, like, 10,000 of them. So, like, dial it back. Like, don't have an event movie or book that big, so big that there's no human interaction in it. I've just I don't know that I will go back to, like, Marvel's Secret Wars or something, but I'm just kind of curious. Like, were they all just dog shit.
Yeah. Well, stay tuned, folks. We'll continue to find out.
Yeah. If you want to hear me rant, about Civil War II, which I did not read, that's in episode 96, The Unstoppable Wasp, where I just went on a tangent.
Yeah, it was a fun one too. Civil War II, which is hilarious because I have a Civil War II poster that I fancy. Great
poster,
terrible book. It's the poster. They should have done it should have been a concept poster, and then that's all we need.
That would have been so great.
We don't even need the book.
Yeah, I appreciate you indulging me in this long-winded diatribe against Crisis on Infinite Earths. Thankfully, DC, in case you loved it, I think they've probably made 12 more Crises books at this point. I mean, it's the gift that keeps, crapping on you.
Yeah.
So
maybe they've gotten better as time has gone on. Maybe if you are listening and you can weigh in on Instagram, let us know. Are there Crises books later on? They're like, oh, though they got it right. They learned from their mistakes. That would be great to hear.
I wonder if there's like a real lesson in people who, for people who write fantasy and science fiction, there are just some problems that are too big to even try to solve.
Yeah.
Like just, it's in a narrative form in that way. Yeah. Like it's, I don't know what would have been like if they did something like they do with the New 52 or whatever, the Rebirth or something, where it's just like all of a sudden the next month was just issue number 1 and everything before it had been erased.
Yeah.
Like there's just no Supergirl and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And like Civil War II, I harbor all these grudges against Crisis because they eliminated my favorite version of the Huntress, who was Batman and Catwoman's daughter on Earth 2. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me that now she's, the daughter of like a mobster and she has there's no lineage, the super bad guy, good guy lineage kind of thing. It's so, this is a mess. And yeah,
it makes me appreciate it. Honestly, I hate to say this, but it makes me appreciate titles like Invincible.
Oh my gosh,
they're done. There's not gonna, he won't keep writing Invincible for another 45 years. Where it's one story start to finish. He could bring it back. He's got a daughter, in the canon now that he could do another run on. But it's not like, Superman's almost, God, we're getting closer to 100 years of Superman. It's like that. It's insane that you can keep retconning and redistributing and splitting up and you making up all these sort of excuses to keep the story going versus just creating a new character. It's at some point it'll behoove of both DC and Marvel to really start thinking about what are new characters that nobody's seen yet. Because when was the last time that happened in mass? Not just a little one-off here or there, but oh my God, here's a whole new. This is the new X-Men, and we're going to ride this as hard as we ever did the X-Men. What is that?
Or as I would suggest and have done on this podcast many times, or just show them in limited arcs. Forget continuity.
Yeah. The White Knight.
The archetypes are established. Mm-hmm. Just take 3 months, 6 months, a year, or just take 2 issues and tell a cool Superman story. And then, I mean, there are cool things I talked about the Mighty Thor when Jane Foster takes over the hammer. And I thought that creative team did such a good job from the beginning to the end of having a real vast universe of her having to interact with all this stuff, but still having a good core story and it being about characters and stuff. But they could have done that in a year and I would have thought it was awesome. It's the miracle that it lasted 4 years or whatever it did, so I just don't, it's a weird thing. It should just be a lot of important lessons to us as we create our own things and we go, do I want this to at what cost should this survive forever? Some continuity,
or we're even seeing that in things like Star Wars. It's just we don't need the Skywalkers anymore. It's not interesting at all. We need something new, or just I'm still interested in seeing Star Wars stories, but I'm getting a little tired of that. There needs to be something new. I'd rather, I'm fine with the product. Imagine if they had just kept making Back to the Future movies, going back to that real quick. I mean, we love it because there's just those three and they're nice and tight, and they have a really just wonderful focus that you just want to relive again and again. If they had gone on, if there was Back to the Future 55 right now, it's like, think about how many different twists and turns would have had to make to keep that interesting. Doctor Who can get away with it. That's like the only thing that comes to mind where I'm like, what's a story that's just as long that seems to still stay relevant? But baked into the DNA of that show is the ability to make massive changes, but still keep the continuity, more or less.
Yeah, that's a great example of they had to put it in the, like you said, like into the DNA. They had to figure out what am I trying to say? A mechanism by which they could like refresh the universe, but stay in continuity.
And and it's really amazing because they put that in the 60s, like right before the second season or the second Doctor came in. They're like, oh shoot, our lead actor, he's not physically able to keep doing the role. What should we do? They invented this idea of regeneration. At the time, like, it was inventive as hell for the time, but how fortuitous in that they basically set up a situation where they can recast the character in whatever shape, size, race, or gender they want. And the show keeps going. And unlike James Bond, they don't have to pretend that like the previous iteration didn't exist, or, James Bond has to kind of skirt around that in these weird, interesting ways. It's like, what continuity do we bring forth from actor to actor? Last time around, Judi Dench was the only one who made the cut.
Well, that was so weird.
Yeah, it's very weird. But like, then Doctor Who is just like, we can fire off companions as long as this time machine looks like this police box. That's all we need. And I mean, that was just such a genius thing to do. So I don't know. I feel like both DC and Marvel have the ability now. They've seen other stuff. There's plenty of examples that as we just illuminated. They could easily start making some really interesting, bold changes that I think would keep a fresh readership going. I mean, the reason I don't read any of these mainstream, these main title books, these, like the main four, or whatever they are, read the serialized versions, like, issue 203 or whatever. I don't do that because there's nowhere to jump in. We've talked about this in previous episodes. There's nowhere to jump in. I'm not convinced that, like the next 10 books aren't going to be drawn really well, and then some new artists will take over from there, and I'll hate it. And it would make more sense if it was encapsulated in its own, unique, limited series or something. I would be a bigger reader if all of that was split out, but we can talk more about that.
Yeah. I'll plug two more of our shows, which is, if you want to hear Taylor explain Doctor Who to me, that is episode number 7.
Was it that long ago? Wow.
I know. If you want to hear me, I don't think I explained James Bond to you, but I talk a lot about the James Bond of the books and stuff in episode number 6.
Oh, wow.
Where we talked about spy movies, and you talked about the Mission Impossible franchise and that, which I still haven't caught up on. Quick question. Which one do I start with? I have only seen number 1.
For Mission Impossible?
Yeah.
You've seen the Brian De Palma one.
Yes.
That remains the best one in my opinion.
Okay.
I would then go to the Philip Seymour Hoffman one, which is number 3.
Okay. So skip the John Woo one, right?
So technically that one doesn't even exist. I've signed a pact of people that we've all sort of agreed to just erase it from this reality.
I think you're being totally literal. I think you really have signed a pact.
It never happened. No, I would do Philip Seymour Hoffman's probably my second favorite, closely followed by the I think number 4. It's the next one after that. Yeah, the next one after that. The Brad Bird directed one. That one might be the best one just overall, because Brad Bird did such a great job. The De Palma one is stylistically the best one, but yeah, then go from there. And then since then, it's just, they stopped after that one. They stopped writing. And literally, this is true. They stopped writing a script. They started writing set pieces, and then they just built the story around the set pieces literally as they were filming them.
Oh,
it's like, well, what should happen? Let's see. We have this set pieces. Tom Cruise is going to get attached to an airplane as it goes into space or something. Okay, cool. How does that happen? Let's think about it. So they're literally stringing together a story. So that's why when you watch these movies, you're like, that wasn't really like it's they seem so paper thin narratively, and it's just because they built these cool action sequences, and that's it.
Honestly, that is a great wrap up to a book episode where we mainly discussed a book that started with just a problem and worked its way backwards to character and story, and never quite got to the last one.
Well, on that note, you can find us anywhere you can find podcasts. Spotify is still to come, but look for us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Pocket Cast, and more. You can also find us online. We are panelism.inc on Instagram, and that is also our URL, www.panelism.inc. That's .ink. Subscribe, share, and tell your friends. Also, leave us feedback wherever you can. We appreciate it, and definitely we read it all. So anytime you have a comment on the show or a question or a complaint, send it our way.
Yes, and we will see you for episode number 100.
That's right. Can't wait. See you then.